Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good people. Justin Gates here with the Business Builder Podcast, aka Brother Juice, in the house with Shane Stone of Stone Solid Digital Marketing. And man, I've come across a lot of digital marketers here
I bet you
in
have.
recent days.
Dime a dozen.
Well, but there's a reason for that, right? There's got to be a reason because people need help with it. So let's talk about that. Where you have your own company, Stone Solid Digital. What is it that you do for your clients?
That's a great question. So, like you said, we're a dime a dozen digital marketers, right? And a little quick history, if that's okay, of why I started. So, I've been working for digital marketing agencies for 6 to 10 years, in one way or another.
Right.
Whether it's copywriting, doing paid advertising, SEO, you name it, I've done it. And I've noticed issues with agencies and digital marketers across the board. And about 4 years ago, I started writing it down, and figuring out what I can do to fix these issues and bringing them these solutions to the SLTs, senior leadership teams of these agencies I work for, whether they're the smaller agencies or larger agencies. And so the three main problems I ran into was one, exploitative pricing.
Right.
I used to work for a very large agency, and I'm not going to discuss my own personal salary, but suffice it to say, I was making the company after the retainers that my clients were paying and the commissions on their ad spend. I was making the company easy $350,000 a month, and I
Right.
guarantee you, because you can sit here and look at me on this screen, that I was not making anywhere near that per month.
Right.
So that's the first big thing is the exploitative pricing. The second one was the lack of empathy for the client or the partner, right? So in the sense of Justin, you have your HVAC business, right?
Yeah.
And I'm going to send you all the best leads I can because I'm good at what I do. But I was told repeatedly that that's not our problem what Justin does with those leads. What you get those leads, if you use them or not, if you call them quickly or not our problem.
Right.
Which to me, in my mind, being a little bit neurodivergent myself, is if we don't care what he does with the leads, how is he going to stay in business and pay us?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
all big second problem, churn.
Yeah.
That's the big second problem, client churn. The third one is lack of transparency.
Right.
Either the digital marketer gets too busy, doesn't disclose what they're doing to the client. Sorry, that was a Freudian slip.
Right.
For the client, and not relating what they're doing to the holistic growth of their business. Right. So this is a long answer to this first question.
Sure.
But I apologize for that. But what I do is I do the full stack digital marketing like everyone else does, right? Every other digital marketing agency. But I go a step further. In my company, I am concerned with what happens with sales enablement. So if I send you 1,000,000 leads and you don't know what to do with them, that's my problem. Because I'm providing you with a smorgasbord of food, but not giving you any plates, forks, knives, anything to deal with that. And you are good at what you do as an HVAC, in this instant, as an HVAC owner,
Sure.
but I'm supposed to be good at growing your business. That's why you hired me as a marketer, right? So I've built frameworks on how you can, one, keep track of these leads, two, have time to contact these leads, and the operations behind all of that, and what to say to these leads as they come in.
Okay, so it's more like not only a lead generator, but also after you get the leads, here's how you engage that potential lead to ultimately lead to a sale. So it's almost like kind of, I don't want to say sales training, but it's a little bit of that, it sounds like.
Yeah, and I tailor it to whatever the business owner feels comfortable with, right? What I've found with home services, for example, is that they're getting more and more embracing of AI and platforms like Go High Level, where you can automatically schedule meetings
Yes.
and consulting and everything like that, and then go out, be able to schedule the actual repair or appointment, because no, you can't go out as an HVAC guy and replace
Yeah, you can't
a
do a whole thing.
huge
Yeah.
unit. Yeah, exactly.
That's not going to be a
the same day.
1 hour job.
Yeah, exactly. So you got to schedule that out, right? Same thing with a roofer. Sometimes electricians can get in there and do the thing, but 9 times out of 10, there's a comeback that has to be involved.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And then I go one step further, and this is applicable not only to like home services, but to every other lead gen business, e-commerce, everything. Like e-commerce is a little easy. I'll be the first digital marketer to admit that e-commerce is a lot easier, because you don't have the lead gen portion. You just
Right.
you get people to come in, buy the
Yeah,
stuff,
buy the thing.
and then you got to figure out how to have them come back.
Right.
But the lead generation is a little bit more difficult, especially B2B nowadays, because as business owners, we're leery of everything.
Yeah.
And that is the third problem, is not only the lack of transparency of me with you as a business owner, but the lack of transparency with the business owner and their client. So, for example, the churn, right? That's what it is, right? One of the problems is the churn. I not only focus on the churn for my own business, right, but the focus on the churn for your business. Because as, for example, a roofer, right, they're one and done. 25 years, your warranty is 25 years nowadays on these roofs, you're done, right? But the trick is to stay in the zeitgeist of the mind of that homeowner, because I don't know, if you're aware of this, but we have hurricanes every once in a while here. You know what I mean?
yeah.
And a storm every once in a while, right? But that's the whole thing, is that you want that person that you replace that roof for to remember who you are and come back to you. Just me personally, just because of how I am, I'm a little different. So I always remember who I worked with. You know what I mean? Like, and because I'm just that type of person. But 9 times out of 10, people won't remember.
Right.
And they'll find, oh, this, better deal for this, better deal for that. But you have to always stay on top of mind. Sending out a newsletter. But also, and this kind of goes in, there's many different layers on these 3 things, but also just expressing your concern for them as a business owner, between business owner and client.
Right.
How's your family doing? Keep copious notes on what your client's personal life is like. And it sounds kind of old fashioned, right? I'm not sure if you've ever seen The Office.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Michael Scott has that Rolodex.
Yeah, he's got the Rolex and he's got the notes on.
For as bad a horrible boss as he was, that is a really good tactic to retain clients. Yes, you're always going to have churn, but with that extra care. Now, when you come to software as a service company, where they lose people is in the onboarding. Right. People will buy these complex systems, these CRMs, and I've seen a lot of guys that, have this great idea, but they just can't seem to retain clients, because they are way better than I will ever be at coding, making these things on the back end, but they don't know how to explain this to the client and have systems in check. And you can even do this with AI now, have the client be followed up with, have their own little checklist.
Right.
Have somebody call up and say, hey, how you doing with step XYZ? I noticed you missed this step.
Right.
What can we do to overcome this? Right. It costs the business owner nothing to do that. It's a 5-minute call, 5-minute email, even automatic some of the times.
Yeah, you could either, it costs you very little in terms of time, and if you set it up beforehand, then it doesn't cost you anything, because it's automated. So So I'm glad you mentioned all that stuff. Well, that kind of knocked out that first one.
Yeah, sorry about that. You got to go 2 pages there.
No, but I mean, sometimes that's why, I ask a question and the answer is what it is. You know, sometimes you have to give a more detailed answer. But you brought up AI, and I was going to talk about AI anyway, so let's talk about that. So there's all kinds of stuff that make things automated. So how do you see that playing out in and how you are going to deal with clients. Because I guess it takes a lot of things off of your client's plate. But are you somebody that helps them with that, or are they figuring that on their own, or how does that blend with what you do?
So that blends with what I do is, so I have my own preferred platforms, right? A lot of times clients will have their own platforms that may or may not API with whatever, but I view it as my job to, one, not only produce revenue and help the revenue growth, the overall holistic revenue growth of the business, but also to protect it, right? Because that's something we frequently forget. Because I have a roofing client that he spent a bunch of money with HubSpot. Now, opinions of HubSpot aside, he already spent the money on it. He stuck with it till May or June or something like that.
Right.
We got to make it work. So I took it upon myself to learn HubSpot in depth. Yes, I know. Learn because I think he's doing the switch to WordPress right now, which digital marketers would be like sigh of relief going to WordPress. The
Right.
APIs with everything, but
What's an API, real quick?
an API is a backend connection with another platform. So, for example, Go High Level can API with Facebook.
Okay.
In the sense that Facebook will send the lead directly to, like, if the lead comes in through Facebook directly to Go High Level, and Go High Level will do the steps of following up, booking an appointment.
Okay.
Yada yada yada. Yeah. So it's just getting that funnel into the sale, directing it, which you could do manually if you want. If that's the way somebody wants to run their business, great, more power to them.
No, don't do that.
Yeah, but don't do that.
I do that right now, and that's the
Right.
thing. I know I've missed a lot of money just because because I don't have those automation processes in. But when I first set everything up, a lot of that what exists now didn't exist back then. I mean,
Yeah.
my website's 10 years old, so
Yeah.
a lot of those integrations just weren't there. And then it's like, well, then you have to learn how to do it. You have to learn how to do it. And AI comes along, and I'm like, you know what? Just hold up. Let me figure this out. Figure out
Exactly.
what I want this thing to look like. Because again, this is what I I think it's more prevalent now because of all the stuff that's out there now. You have content now where people are talking about this, but this wasn't around. Like all these people who are talking about step one, step two, this, that, whatever, it didn't exist en masse with the massive amount of information that we have now back when I started. So you really had to learn all this stuff on your own.
Yeah.
And there were very few tutorials on YouTube or other areas to get there. You had to get on a call with tech support and ask somebody how to do all this.
Yeah.
Unless somebody, there were fewer digital marketers around who understood all these things.
Right.
So it really was kind of like you're just jumping into deep end, and
Yeah.
you hope you can swim.
Yeah, exactly. And you hit the nail on the head. And there are still very few digital marketers that get the basic process of it, because it's just the AI exists. It's just the if-then statements that you need to map out on your brain, or even get a little notepad out and draw it out if that's what.
It's my preferred
it
method.
takes too, yeah.
I need a visual representation of what's going to happen, right? Like
Yeah.
start here, go here. If this, then that. If that, then this. Because that customer journey is especially in today's world, right?
Yeah.
With everything being just like this. I forget the last guy who was here. We talked about. I think Hormozy was talking about the 5-minute follow-up. He's like, man, if it's all the studies have shown that if you get a lead, if you follow up with that lead within 5 minutes, they're like 300 or 400% more inclined to follow through to a sale.
That's
right?
absolutely 100%.
And
even to answer the phone.
Yeah, that too, right? Because I won't get into it, but like phone for me has been it's been iffy, right?
Yeah.
So it's like and if you're only a one person setup like I am, then it's like where is your time best spent? You have to just go to the 2 or 3 places where you get the biggest return on your time. Otherwise, you could be chasing your tail. Like
Exactly.
if you can't outsource, and I couldn't before, right? I can do some of it now, but I couldn't before. But so that's what I'm going for now. I'm like, okay, and all the I only have 2 business things that I'm doing right now.
Sure.
But both of those I want streamlined and automated to as much as possible, to where when I finally talk to my end client or the potential lead, it's like it's almost everything is done. They have very few questions. Like they understand everything. They don't gotta interview me for 30 minutes to understand what it is that I'm doing, right?
Right.
Because if my customer journey has not informed them Like really, all it should be is like, hey, when do I sign up, or how do I get
Yeah.
started, right? That's what it should be. And if you're not getting that, oh man, you're missing.
Yeah.
There's bottlenecks in your process, right?
Exactly, exactly. And especially if you're doing B2B sales and a lot, or a B2B business like I am, frankly, is we forget a lot that we need to relate everything back to what's in it for them.
Oh yeah, it's
What's
benefit
what's
for
the
you
what's the
for
revenue,
yeah.
right? But I also like to throw in what's in it for me because I just try to be honest like that. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? So so that way, also the humans are. I'm just basically saying humans are interesting creatures. They don't like to get something for nothing if they're a good human being. You know what I
That's
mean?
true.
And so I find it comforting when somebody tells me and they're trying to sell me on something. I get this out of what you're saying. Even used car salesmen say, "Hey, I'm going to get a commission out of this."
Right.
I hate it when somebody says, "Oh, I'm not getting any commission out of this," or "I'm getting my commission cut in half for this." I'm just like,
It's like, come on now.
yeah, exactly.
You're getting something.
Me personally, I value that upfront honesty because that shows me that they're invested in my well-being because they're being honest. It's like somebody tells me, "Man, Shane, your breath stinks, my friend."
It's like, well,
I mean,
I
honestly, like,
appreciate
if
it.
my breath stinks, man,
Yeah.
you give me a Tic Tac. But that shows me that that person is really concerned about me and my well-being.
Right.
And even though it can be insulting in the get-go, in the long run, that person is really concerned about
Yeah.
me. And that's summing up that, these questions we have so far is that that's what I'm concerned about is the well-being. And people can think I'm being as disingenuous or whatever, but that is really what brings me joy and happiness
Right.
is being concerned about other people's well-being. And I can tell that about you, Justin, because of
Oh,
your
thanks.
follow-up with me. Exactly right. And that you're concerned with raising people up that are wanting to be raised up. And that's kind of my mission in life that I've realized over going, again, like I said in that presentation, right? I go to these SLTs and they say, "Shane, shut up, stay in your lane, shut up, stay in your lane." And I said, "All right, I'll just make my own lane then. If you guys, I'll just try to do it myself." And
Yeah.
and I think, and when I decided that, it seems weird, but it seems like the universe has brought people to me that have that same exact way of thinking, trying to build something good that I can help. And also be able to take care of my family at the same time,
Yeah.
which is always good. I mean, I'm not looking to buy a yacht or anything like that, or buy Twitter. I'm looking to, I'm just looking to, provide for my family, have a comfortable life,
Yeah.
travel every once in a
I only
while.
want this much of the pie,
Yeah,
right?
exactly, right. But it honestly, it just makes me really happy to just sit back and say, hey, I helped build that. Like, hey, I'm a partner in that business.
Right. Yeah, yeah, I could. Yeah, I think that's a good point because you do have a sense of pride when you can look at something and go, hey, I helped build that.
Yeah.
So,
Exactly.
what's the biggest mistake businesses make when trying to scale online? How can they fix it?
That's right. Business. The biggest mistake they make is not putting themselves, and this goes with digital marketers as well. So this is something, if you guys are looking to hire anybody that can hire a digital marketer, I'd highly recommend one myself first. But if you're looking to find somebody else, you just don't like my face, which is fine too. Find somebody and get yourself in the position of your customers. So I was actually interviewing somebody yesterday. He's a semi-retired gentleman working in cybersecurity. Owns a farm out in the boondocks of Missouri. Yeah, like how did I get hooked up with that guy? Long story, we don't have time for that.
Right.
But it was actually, anyway, LinkedIn outreach, which I found a way to make it work, which is, anyway, that's a whole nother
Yeah,
podcast.
that's a
Which
whole
is
nother
LinkedIn.
strategy.
Yeah, if any digital marketers listen to this, like they're going to say, bull crap, this guy can't make
Well,
LinkedIn work.
LinkedIn's an untapped resource.
Yeah, but
Depending on what your niche
yeah,
is.
yeah, exactly. But it can suck up money. But anyway, I found him on there, and I'm doing research for a paper that I'm writing, and he had this analogy that really, really kind of hit home as far as what he was saying to a business, because he does what's called risk governance consulting, which is, if for people who don't know, is basically consulting with CEOs and C-level employees on what risks are acceptable versus what do you want to pay for. And just like this lock on this door right here, let's envision that there's a window above there. You can put all the locks you want on that door, but there's still that glass window.
Yeah.
So what's the level of risk that you want to pay for to install those locks? So and he actually gave a little bit of marketing advice to this chief lending officer. And he said this was years ago, before anybody started doing this, because this guy's an older gentleman. He said, why aren't you guys marketing to women for your lending? And this is mostly when when we were able to have one breadwinner in the house, right? And the chief lending officer said, well, I don't do that in my house. And there was one woman in the boardroom. The woman's like, all ears,
Right.
And he's just like, well, you have a degree in finance. You have a master's in business. Everybody else doesn't. Mm-hmm. So the breadwinner of the home, whether male or female, whomever, is going out and working all day long. I know this in my own family, where we were blessed enough to have my dad, my mother at home. Guess who made all the financial decisions in my household? My mama. Because dad was out working hard all day long at the hydroelectric dam.
Right.
In knee-deep water, mud, muck, whatever. He wasn't going to come home and make decisions on how much to pay for groceries, or what car insurance to go with, what lender to go with. It's not in his wheelhouse. He'd been working 10 hours that day. Mm-hmm. It was the job of my mom as part of the partnership.
Right.
And that was part of her partnership. And that's the biggest mistake businesses make, and that's where I am here to help, is because I get it. I understand where the people are at.
Right.
And that's the biggest mistake marketers make, or not marketers, marketers and businesses make, is they don't go to where their clients are actually at, where the decision makers are actually at.
Yeah. And that's the thing about social media, is that you can get direct feedback, right? Mm-hmm. The thing about what it is now is that with YouTube or with Instagram or TikTok, anywhere you can leave a comment, you can directly engage what your target audience is. So if you understand how to work that correctly, you take that feedback and you just adjust, right? Mm-hmm. You didn't have that before.
Yeah.
You just had to give it to some ad agency and hope it worked. I mean, they
have their expertise.
Yeah, they figured this stuff out a long time ago. I mean, I forget who it was. Somebody said nobody ever. The news never changes, right? The headlines stay the same. It's just the faces are different, And I find that to be true, because what works in print magazines is the same psychology and the same strategies that works on social media. It's, big headline, big promise, something controversial, something attention grabbing. It's imagery, right? It's basically you've taken the strategies from print magazine or print itself, and then just applied it to a video medium and in the form of social media. Right. Whereas before you had to rely on somebody buying the paper or buying the magazine. Now they come to you.
Yeah, it's just right, put it in front of them.
And then you can just basically just deliver those dopamine hits, sometimes on an hourly basis.
Yeah.
Which is, there's good and bad, right? There's it's good for marketing, because it's like, I can get right to my audience.
Right.
But then it can be destructive in a way if you're just glued to your phone all the time, right? And that's a whole other problem.
Yeah.
So, let's talk about that then. So the social media landscape changes daily.
Yes.
Right. What's one unconventional strategy that's working right now for explosive brand growth?
So that's a very loaded question.
Yeah.
Question, right?
Right.
Because what works for one brand in one audience isn't going to work for another brand, another audience, right? What's going to work for me if I'm on social media as a business owner is going to work for me versus if I'm on social media looking for, I don't know, a VR headset for my son for Christmas. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It depends on the mindset. And that's what makes it really complicated. And that's where people like myself get hired, is because you want to do what you're good at and spend time, because that's how you make your money. Let me spend time doing what I'm good at, right? So, and that's the trick. So there's not really one explosive thing, because the content is way different. If you want to make content, if I'm doing marketing for a self-help person or a meditation guru, I'm not going to put attention.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
No,
Like,
that's too
and
much,
then
right?
like chill out. You know what I mean?
Right.
But I mean,
Hey,
that's
let's grab your attention right now. So you can just breathe
yeah,
and then breathe it out.
exactly, exactly, right. But what I would do, what I'm doing is with, I've had those types of clients in the past is start off with meaningful questions. And that's the whole thing is you get somebody thinking. And that's I guess the simple answer to your question is to get that person thinking and reflecting. I'm a firm believer that in the zeitgeist, we're getting tired of, especially in the marketing landscape, of disingenuous behavior.
Yeah, that's
And
certainly authenticity is the next currency other than attention, right? For especially for marketing and social media, digital marketing, it's attention, but then authenticity, right?
Exactly.
And really, people want authenticity. They're going to give their attention to something, but what they give it to, they want some authenticity behind it. So you have to have that. I do believe.
and pay attention when because we're all just tonight when you're surfing reels and you get a commercial that comes by. I mean, we always swipe by them. You know what I mean? But pay attention to what the ones that actually like kind of make you pause instinctually. And you're just like, oh, okay. Just from I don't know, a scientific study on oneself, sort of thing. It's a good thing to just sit there and realize. And I'd be willing to bet, if I was a betting man, to put money on it's something that's more authentic, not some in your face Saturday.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like
Sabado.
yeah, right? Yeah. And so it's just like I'd be willing to bet that that's what kind of rang your bell at that point. Because I'm seeing a pivotal shift of that gimmicky weird. I mean, didn't used to be weird, but something back to when, at least when I was a kid, seeing commercials on the television that were more just relatable.
Yeah.
I think people are getting tired of celebrities,
Was it,
tired of popular,
Well, yeah,
people
the celebrity
telling us what to do. You know what I mean? Like that's.
a celebrity, as we call it, the Hollywood celebrity is dead. Now it's influencers, right? That's the thing. And even the age of the influencer is starting to die away,
Because it's become disingenuous.
right? Because everybody knows that there's only, the top 5% of people can travel around on planes all the time. If I have never seen your face before and you're like always in a plane or always doing, I'm like, where did you come from? Like,
Yeah.
who, like,
And here's a hard truth for everybody who's wanting to be an influencer. 99% chance you're not going to make it.
No.
Unfortunately. And I wish you all the best if you want to do that. If you have a weird gimmick or something funny, more power to you. Go do it. Chase your dream. But if we were to do a background check on the largest influencers, I'd be willing to bet that that's probably, family money that backed him up the whole time. I mean, it's just a weird feeling that
the job title influencer to me, I don't know, man. I think that it's, unless you're genuine. Gary Vee, for example, right? I like Gary Vee because he's been the same guy for the past 15 years. And he is genuine. He is authentic. Is he an influencer? I don't think he would call himself that. Does he have influence? Yes. So somebody like him, I would say, you can give them that title, and it would be, I could live with that. But a lot of these people who, if you call yourself an influencer, I don't believe you. If I hear it from somebody else, like, hey man, have you seen this guy or have you seen this girl? We all have influence. So in essence, we can all be influencers because we're influencing. We're going to have some influence one way or another. But I think it's, I don't know, just to self-title yourself that, like, what do you do? Oh, I'm an influencer. And it's like, really? Because I've never heard of you.
Because I'm always interested in how they got there.
Me too.
You know what I mean? Like, if there's a person that got there that, their primary job was doing something else, and then all of a sudden they have some good ideas and everything like that, and they limit their their pushing of other people's products. You know what I mean? Like, that to me is more of a reliable influencer, at least in my opinion, than somebody who stands in front of me and tries to hawk something from somebody else.
Right.
You know, because it's like, okay, you're being paid, and it's all sellout argument and everything like
Right.
that.
Right.
But if you're into that and that's what that rings your bell, then
Look,
awesome. You know what I mean? But for me personally,
yeah.
I try not to follow in like somebody that labels himself as an influencer, like that's their main income.
Yeah.
Because it's just
I don't know.
I'm craving the authenticity.
Yeah, you
just as
gotta-
a person,
yeah.
and so that's what I try to instill into my work and to my business model is that authenticity.
Yeah.
Of yes, I'm going to send you leads, but what are you doing with them?
Mm-hmm.
How are you keeping them as clients? What's your current status right now? What's your current operation right now? Let's tweak it. Let's make it more streamlined so that you don't work 70 hours a week as a business owner.
Right.
Because then what happens there also, when we start to get employees, we expect that out of our employees, which is completely unfair.
No, it's
Because it's not their dream.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? We're
Yeah.
paying them to do us a favor.
Right.
Right? Like, how is it fair to expect me, the guy that comes over and mows my lawn, to stick around all day long after he's done mowing my lawn?
Yeah, that's the job. He got paid for that. Yeah.
Exactly. So it's also unfair to us as business owners and our families to work 60, 70 hours a week. So that's where I come in as basically, and I thought of this the other day, actually, just thinking about this podcast, like, how can I succinctly describe what I do? And of course, I failed on the first question, right?
I wouldn't call it a failure.
Yeah, but a
call it
very
a failure.
verbose answer.
Well, it's sometimes you got to clarify, right?
Yeah, right. But in a very real sense, people that their revenue is 500K to 3 million or 4 million a year cannot afford to pay a full-time CMO, COO, CSO. That's altogether on the short end. If you're going to get somebody worth it, is 600K a year, and then you have all the other employees you got to pay. And I don't know if you've worked with many C-level employees. I don't consider myself a C-level employee.
Right.
I'm just a founder. I'm just trying to do a job. You know
Right.
what I mean?
Yeah.
But eventually, because I have mostly contractors that work with me, right? In my title, it's CEO, but I hate it because I don't want to get shot in the street. No, you can cut that out. Cut that out. Cut that out. Cut that out. But it's the I guess my point is that I am coming in as that fractional all three. And then building something for that business owner that they can take from 500K to 1 million to 3 million to 10 million, and then be able to hire those
hire
full-time CMOs, those full-time
Right.
COOs, to really help them with the direction, so that CEO, because that CEO's job, and this is something a little bit else I do with what I do, is that one job of that CEO is to protect and gain revenue. That's that one job, because now all of a sudden, not only does he have his family depending on him, he's got his team depending on him, those new C-level employees are depending on him.
Any employees down the line.
To bring home the bacon,
Yeah.
as it were. You know what I mean? But and sorry, I'm using he, all that, but she, whomever, that's their job, is to bring in revenue. And that's one of the notes I took down in my studies, is that I would see these C-level employees being like, hey, Shane, what are you doing with Google ads, with the paid ads? And I'm like, bro, you should be like going out to expos and like schmoozing and bringing in clients. Don't worry about what I'm doing. Like, you hired me because you trusted me, supposedly, right? Let me do what I do, and you won't. And I'll check in with my boss. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's why you have these people, because that's the thing. And going back to that, what's the biggest mistake is that the owners of the business, founders of the business, forget that they are there to bring in revenue.
Right.
And when they get to a point where they have multiple employees, people that they trust, let them run the business, and you bring in the bacon.
Yeah.
And then look at the reports that come in. And then have those C-level employees underneath the CEO. What their job is to protect. Yours is to bring.
Right. I guess the only other way to do that is to have, if you have a small group of people who kind of have shared, understand the vision, they have the shared vision, and then each one can go, okay, I'm good at this, you're good at this, you're good at this, right?
Yep.
That might be the only best other way to do it. But boy, that's stressful in the early days if you're, especially if you're
Exactly.
trying to build something enormous.
From 5 to 3 million.
Yeah, it's
Or
hard.
500K to 3 million. Even like the steps, like, because I'm not near 500K. You know, I just started this after years of study and of observation and writing stuff down and figuring, real world solutions to this. Because we'll go online, you see on Facebook, oh, we'll get you leads, we'll fill up the sales funnel, blah.
Right.
9 out of 10 of them are just garbage
Right.
because it's not a real person. You know what I mean? It's
Well, and they don't, like, I guess some of them are legit, but they never really answer the question of how. It's like they
We'll
give
do it
you
for
just
you.
enough, and then it's like, well, you got to sign up and get the email letter, and so you start to realize that it's all this big, huge funnel. It's like, just tell me how you're going to solve my problem. I'd rather just have a 2-minute video on YouTube or watch something on Instagram, and then I can decide, okay, this dude has this solution to my problem or he doesn't.